Hello and welcome to Winter Disco Tabletop Gaming. In this video, we are checking out the Adeptus Mechanicus range, just checking out all the models and basically going over a review of the entire range. Yes, there's probably some new ones coming out soon, but we're just going to check out what we've got at the moment and just generally talk about them because it's one of the more interesting factions I find, particularly when you talk about the history of Warhammer 40,000. They've always generally pretty much been there, not so much from model releases and things like that, but from lore itself. They were there through the Age of Strife. In the background, apparently they were sending raiding parties or research teams down to Earth and just checking out what's going on. And it's one of the more interesting, I guess, factions because of the very religious nature of it, the techno-religious nature of it, their view of the universe and the world and how the world works and what it is to be human and all of that. I find that very, very interesting. I've always found things like transhumanism and I guess cybernetic manipulation and augmentation very, very interesting. I remember in the 90s, I was very into transhumanism and thinking how one day it'd be really cool to be able to connect directly to computers, which we can essentially kind of do now. I've always had a love for Adeptus Mechanicus, and the faction really only came into existence as a playable faction kind of when I was out of 40k. There was like a 15-year period where I wasn't really involved in the hobby at all, and when I came back in, I saw them around. I'm like, this is exactly how I kind of imagined them, from all the art, all the lore and the background and the writing about them. So I thought this was a good one to do because it's super interesting, very different, some weird funky things going on, particularly in the last few releases. And I put a poll out recently about what faction you'd like to see. It was pretty, I would say it was overwhelming, but the vast majority wanted Adeptus Mechanicus. So that's what we're going to do. The first models we're going to look at are the Skitarii themselves, so the mainstay frontline unit troop choice. So when you get a box of the Skitarii, you can build them either as the Rangers or of the Vanguard that we can see on screen now. The Rangers have more of the long range rifle type things, very funky guns, and I really want to talk about the guns because it's one of the things I love about admech. And then the Vanguard have the more rad guns, radiation, plasma type weapons. But let's talk about the main body itself. So in the lore, all these models are very highly augmented. They're basically essentially vat grown and then had all their limbs removed and cybernetics imposed. Honestly, they're barely human. And the more I read of the lore, the more I find them to be definitely more machine than man. You can send them orders and they will execute those orders. It's not like you give an order and then they're like, well, we might do it, but you give an order and they will execute it. So very robotic in nature. So with that, the bodies themselves are pretty much humanoid. There is some semblance of humanity there, but for the most part, we'll just say they're completely robotic. They're not robots. They still have self-awareness as far as I'm aware. I could be very wrong. Let me know in the comments. Completely augmented, mostly legs are gone, arms are gone, heads are probably still intact, some internal organs and general structure and makeup of the body is still there, but organs would be replaced, particularly like the eyes and things like that, completely gone and replaced. So as with most admech, you are fighting a double-sided thing of how far can we push the human body versus how far can we go while still keeping humanity. And that definitely comes across throughout all of their iconography with the icon, which is like the half skull, one half a skull, the other half mechanical. And I really love that. It just says so much about the faction and their worldview themselves. So like I was saying, the body is completely mechanicized. Mechanicized, is that even a word? Has the very, very iconic cloak and hood from the earliest artwork of Adeptus Mechanicus before there were really Adeptus Mechanicus, when they were still just called tech priests. They were all hooded. They all had cybernetic parts in them. So this is very much, you look at this and be like, yep, it's admech. Even if you took off the icon on the chest, you'd be like, yep, this is admech without a doubt. So let's talk about the weapons, because I find the admech weapons to be so interesting, not only from what they are, but how they look, the whole aesthetic of them. So you can see they're rifles with wooden stocks, ornate filigree on the stocks, looks just like a rifle that you would find throughout history, contemporary history, past history. When rifles came around, they have that old feel, which is the wood, the ornateness of the metal bracing, probably brass bracing and different filigree on there, particularly on the handle, has like the trigger guard. Looks like you pop out the cylinder, pop a new one in, and away you go. I love that whole aesthetic. This is highly advanced, but also very old. And we see that particularly with the newer releases, which we're going to go through later, which is like the new flyers. It's that old Renaissance influence, but robotics and cybernetics and all of that stuff. I find that extremely interesting. Such a good mix. And it's something you get in things like, what do we call it? Steampunk to a degree, particularly where it leans to be the more robotic side of things, which I guess steampunk is mostly Victorian with steam power advancing technology a bit. But if it was a bit more futuristic, when you go into things like starting to use things like electricity and radiation and things like that, I get very much the vibe of the Skitarii completely when they've got that. But I love the attention to detail, just little tiny bits on the backpack. We can't really see too many here. If we go into one of these images, yeah, there we go. You know, on the backpack, we have like, it's a leather bag, but with like straps on it. And it's got all this mechanical stuff in it. It's such a juxtaposition to have all this highly, highly advanced mechanical things, like the gun, the pistol of this guy is over the top and ridiculous, firing off some radiation things, whatever. But then his backpack is held on with leather straps. And you see that in the Space Marines as well, like their belts are leather and they got leather pouches and things like that. And then you put on like the purity seals, which are very, I wouldn't say they're ancient, but for even from current real history, these are things that exist and have been out of date for even a very long time. It's just that complete juxtaposition. And I think you see that more in the Adeptus Mechanicus than any other faction. And we've got some more close-ups. I'm just trying to see if we can get some of the gun. There we go. This is what we were talking about the guns before. Ornate, filigree, brass with wood and different kinds of things kind of held together. Then it starts to get like robotic and futuristic and sci-fi. You know, I love the faction, and one of my favorite kits is the Skitarii kit. So let's look at the Vanguard. This is more the sci-fi version of them to me anyway. So we do have the leader, like basically the difference is they have a different helmet and they have different guns, like a huge plasma type rifle. Very nice. And there we go. There's a really good example of the leather backpack there. It's just ridiculous. And then you got all the cabling hanging off because you got to have lots of cables with admech. You just have to. It's the law. So it's just such a weird juxtaposition. And then we got some more there. So again, like the helmets are different. They are slightly different models rules wise, but we're focusing on the models themselves. I prefer these helmets. Feels very much more medieval. So again, you're getting this other influence of something super, super old with the super, super new and futuristic. And then we got the weapons here. So again, lots of detail, lots of old world things, and then like with wood and then different mechanical, futuristic, glowing sci-fi bits with like a red cloak with a hood. I love just the juxtaposition of all the different bits and pieces. So I'm not giving ratings in this part of the series. I had previously. So if you've checked out the other ones, I was giving like a star rating out of 5 for what I thought. But honestly, this would be up there. I think I'd give it like a 4.5. I want some more difference. I'd like the cloaks to be more tattered, a bit more rundown, a bit more difference in the cybernetics and things like that. But they are bred to be soldiers and they do generally get the same cybernetics. So it makes sense that they are a very coherent unit. I got to go back to these guns. Seriously, this is what sold me. The weapons sold me. When I came back into the hobby, I'm like, oh, they look kind of funky. Oh, it's admech. Oh, that's cool. Ah, yep, weapons, done. The rifles, it says so much about the faction. And that's why I wanted to start with this particular model, because it just screams and tells you exactly what you're going to get with admech. The very, very new with the very, very old and odd outdatedness of things. You've got the meeting of meat flesh and robotics and cybernetics and everything like that, wrapped up in like a very iconic red cloak with the red cog trimmings on the collars and everything like that. Yeah, just such an iconic thing. There we go. Skitarii, Rangers and Vanguard. Seriously, I love it. So from the oldest admech models, thereabouts, tech priests are a bit older, which we're going to look at later. We're going to go to some of the newest, the Pteraxii Sterylizors and the Pteraxii Skystalkers. So again, it's the same single kit that you can do different loadouts. When these first came out, I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. I don't like it. And I'm still not a huge fan of these models. I get the historical context of it. Again, like I was talking about with the Skitarii, taking the old and new, in this instance, taking things like Michelangelo wings that you would put on machines to make them fly in the Renaissance, to just crazy flamethrowers and cybernetic enhanced human beings, hitting that transhumanism thing again. Absolutely get the concept, and I like the concept. The execution is kind of odd. There was a comment made by the Warhammer community team when they showed off these in a live stream. The comment was along the lines of, these things shouldn't fly, but they do. And it's almost like the admech don't understand how it flies, but it works. So we're going to use it. And that seems to be basically 40k as a whole. All this stuff works. We don't know how, but we're going to embrace it because so much has been lost. Probably they've lost more than they've ever known. Kind of confusing, but yeah, the whole admech are all about searching for things. And there are far more efficient modes of flying than this, but this works for them. So why not go with it? It could be because they have some diagrams of Michelangelo from tens of thousands of years ago. That would be almost like, still like 40,000 years. 38,000 years ago in the past. They might have that, and because it's so old, they were like, oh, this is ancient technology. This is perfection. And they made it work, even though it's not practical at all. They're really, really funky models that they still look really, really funny. I don't particularly like them. I don't like the feet on them. I like that it is an augmentation and they are mimicking birds. They might have seen some images of some old birds or something and been like, okay, let's just add some claws to our feet, because they don't particularly care too much about the human body. They do want to tread that line between human and transhuman. They're willing just to chop the legs off and put some scary claws on, because that makes sense for these type of things. So it almost looks like there's jet engines on the back of them. I haven't actually seen the back of the models themselves, because on the website there's not a lot of images, which is a bit disappointing, but it looks like it's almost like a jet pack on the back. So the wings probably don't even do anything. It might help them glide, but overall probably useless. When you look at the red part of the wings themselves, that curved bit with the rivets, very admech. You see that design element throughout a lot of the other models in the range. It's almost subtle. It's something that's very common. So it's almost like it's not a hard edge either. So it's definitely curved a bit, just enough around the edges that you can probably see it up in where my mouse is up there. Just around the edges, it's more curved. It's not a straight line like you would get with we'll go with Imperial Guard or Space Marines, where that line up there would be very sharp edge. There's a bit more curve to it. And I think that is very, very, like every element of any model that Games Workshop design is very intentional. And I think it is to soften the model itself that, yes, they are very robotic, mechanical, cybernetic, transhuman, but there's still an aspect of humanity, still an aspect of nature in there. And I think that's definitely intentional through all the various different curves in the models. When we go through, we'll see that more. So I had a little bit of a pause there just to really look at these models a lot more in depth. And my opinion hasn't changed too much. I'm not overly a fan of it. I think there's a lot of issues there. One of the issues that once you get over the full overall look with the weird Michelangelo wings, you get to the face, which is very different to other admech models. They've got like the tight bodysuit on, which yes, the other models do, but it dominates the model itself. And then they have very minimal armor pieces. I would prefer that there's more tubing going on, a little bit more mechanical stuff on the body itself, because there's like, it's almost strapped into, there's like leather straps around the upper legs to strap them in. I don't know, there's something about it that doesn't really sit right with me. But let's check out the other ones. So we have the Skystalkers. This is better. When we go into the close up in a second, we'll see why, and I'll be able to explain why. Yes, the models are exactly the same, but if we jump back and forth, yeah, like even the silhouettes are very, very similar. The guns are different, much more mechanical. It's hard to explain really what I'm trying to say. So these are the flamers. They're very long, have very big parts on them. It just seems very designed, form over function over form, sorry. And this is sort of a very important point that I really should have stressed before, that you have this idea of function and form, where when you have a good product or a good thing, there is a nice meeting place between form and function. So form being what it looks like, how it feels, how it makes you feel, when function is, it does the job. The weapons on these, which are the flamethrowers, very much function over form. It's a flamethrower. That's what it is purely designed to do. There is no real thought into, well, let's actually add some nice design to it, add some nice wood elements that you can hold on to, like hold it against the body so it feels like it's nice to hold a hand grip on the hand that's holding like the chamber part of it. Like you do have the little handgun there that has that little thing on there. So there's definitely more form in that over function. But in these ones, if we go to the close-up now, we've got the gun stock with the various different metals, the curved lines, the shapes. There's more form here. And to me, even though I don't particularly like the barrel, I would prefer that to be something slightly different, a bit more, probably a little bit of filigree on there, something, who knows, something like that. Even down to the magazine casings that has that little metal bit on the bottom. Just add a little bit of extra detail. There is more form here over function. You don't need all this extra stuff on top, but that's what admech is to me. That ridiculous, we have a gun, but we're gonna actually add something to it. We're gonna take time and effort to create a piece of craft, an artifact as such. The flamethrower versions kind of miss that. As we got the close up now, we can go back to the faces. They're a bit funky because one of the big eye lenses is an oval, which is a bit weird to me. This is more admech. That face with the multiple eye lenses instead of the one like visor eye lens with some more cabling going in different places. Again, it's still the same body because it's the same kit. This is moving to more towards admech that I would expect. So to me, the Skystalkers are a better model overall because you do have that gun, you do have that helmet or the masked face. I still do want to see some more stuff on the body, possibly even some more mechanicalized, or the backpack is more mechanicized. Mechanicized? I don't think that's a word. Mechanicalized? Sounds a bit better. You know what I'm saying. They're very interesting models. They're just a bit weird. It is a big, I guess it's a dramatic shift from the original admech models. With these wings alone, it's bringing a lot of organic shapes to it, natural shapes. Like I imagine that these wings actually do flap. So they do have the little 2 jet engines on them, as you can see there. If we go back to the big image, I imagine they flap. Hang on, let's go back to this. It looks like these do rotate, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it makes sense for admech. They've found some technology. They don't understand it. They made it work, even though it probably shouldn't work like this, but they did it. So yeah, it's a weird one. The Pteraxii sterilizers and Skystalkers. Let me know what you think of these, and particularly the new design element. It's a weird one, but like I said, it fits thematically. I think it just misses the mark a bit, for me anyway. So as this video has now gone on for about 16 minutes, we're going to leave it there. This is turning into be a very extended series where the previous ones I was getting through the entire range in about 2 or 3 videos. I thought going into some depth and detail is definitely warranted for a lot of these models. There's a lot of lore built into these models themselves, a lot of very, very subtle design choices. And that's really what I'm trying to exemplify when I'm talking about these models, that there is some very subtle design cues in there that lead your brain down a particular path. You might not even be aware of it. So that's why I spent a fair bit of time. So that's why we only got through like 2 models, 2 boxes. It's gonna be like that. I get wordy sometimes. So the next one we'll be doing the Electro Priests and I think the Dune Crawler. Yeah, so let me know what you think. If you have gotten this far, let me know if you're enjoying this sort of in-depth analysis of these models, because I really do like doing them. I'm out of here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.